All right, well, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Tom Baker, who doesn't really need any introduction to most of us here. For those of you who don't know Tom, Tom is a former Catholic priest, 10 years in the Catholic ministry. I believe he was telling us the other day that he had the first 5 years he was in a parish, and then he went to a seminary. And his specialty in the seminary was teaching all the young priests how to give talks. He was in charge of homilies. So no wonder Tom is a master of public speaking when it comes to spiritual talks. Tom is a hard worker. He works all day as a psychotherapist now, has a very big practice. And then on Sunday afternoons, for many years, he's been facilitating a Course in Miracles at the ARE. And this week I was talking to someone, Tom's name came up, and she said she attends some class he attends now. He runs now at Unity Renaissance. I think it's on Monday night on the New Testament or something like that. Is that what it is, Tom? The New Parables. Yeah, on the parables. Yeah. So the point is, Tom is a hard worker, and if there was ever an example of someone who was truly using his life as a servant of God, it would be this gentleman that we call Tom Baker. Let's give him a round of applause.
Cheryl, that was so beautiful. It was passionate, like the fellowship. Here, let me have water. It's water.
You're the one that has the turn.
Huh?
Oh, turn it to wine.
Oh!
I'll try. Good show.
Still water. Having a bad day. Well, I had a very future-oriented childhood. As early as I can remember, grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, friends of the family, they would always ask me what I was going to do when I grew up. This question was never directed to my sister. To my sister, they always said, "She's so darling." Then they would turn to my little self, and with lilting but serious voices would say, "Now, Tommy, what's the little man going to do when he grows up?" As the years went on, I learned that 3 professions got approval. They were doctor, lawyer, and minister. Lawyer and minister got nods and smiles, but with doctor, there were cheers. By 10, I was reading medical books and becoming a hypochondriac. When I was 12, my mother took me on a tour of the University of Kentucky Medical School. My mother asked our guide, who was an intern dressed in green scrubs, what the most important quality for a future physician, what the best thing that you could have to be a physician, the best character quality. And he answered immediately. He said, "A solid sense of responsibility." My mother looked at me and beamed. "That's my Tommy, as responsible as the day is long." I, of course, did not become a doctor. I'm kind of glad. The paperwork is killer. But in my life, I have had two jobs that required a lot of responsibility. One as a priest, and the other as a therapist. So when you say Tom Baker, like Bruce so kindly did, I assume you have a picture of a kind of professorish older guy who has responsibility written all over him. Now, I must confess that I'm also messy, somewhat disorganized, and fairly absent-minded. I probably would not pay taxes every year were it not for my wife. I also never make up my bed. I leave half-filled coffee cups around the house and the office. And if I make a mess, I'm fine with somebody else cleaning it up. But other than these details, I'm very responsible. I go to work every day. I'm on time. I stick to the treatment plan. I listen and respond. Responsible. Several weeks ago, one of my partners was cleaning up our little kitchen, and she asked if I had read the memo about keeping the kitchen clean. She was cleaning up the kitchen in that kind of intense way that suggests unhappiness. I said I had never seen the memo. She promptly went to a file folder and whipped it out. And she said, "You got it, but you ignored it. You're so irresponsible." I was speechless. Me. I've been working on responsibility since I was 12 years old. I staggered to my office, sat down in the listening chair, took a sip of some day-old coffee, just the way I like it. How dare she challenge the responsible one? Now, I told lots of people this story, but instead of sharing my outrage, they nodded thoughtfully and said very little. I told my wife, and she graciously said that I do spread out and leave stuff for her to clean up. But that's okay, she said. Nobody's perfect. There's always room for improvement. Improvement. Not perfect. I sat down and my cat jumped onto my lap and stared at me with his big green eyes. He thought I was okay. My rage turned to thoughtfulness. Why do I have to be seen as perfectly responsible? When I was in the seminary, there was this big poster that I used to pass every day, and it showed a priest with his hands around some kids, his arms around some kids, and he was with their mother and father, and he was standing outside the church, and the sun was shining. And underneath, it said, "Loving, strong, and wise." And from that day on, I was trying to be those things, and I must say, responsible too. As I thought, with my cat on my lap, purring, smiling at me, I realized that deep down, I really don't believe that I'm very responsible, or loving, or strong, or wise. I wasn't exactly an imposter, but I really didn't think I was those things. I began to see that my persona was a kind of substitute for something else. Something else I thought was missing. What was missing was the lovable me. My persona, and most important, my defense and promotion of my persona, was keeping me so occupied that I didn't have to look at the me that no one ever saw, but I often felt. I had friends in my life that I have been very proud of. One was named Stan, who was a quadriplegic, and the other was named Joanne, who had cerebral palsy. Both were paralyzed, both were helpless, both were dependent on others for their every need. I was proud of them because they made me look very good and very responsible. I visited them every week for a period of 5 years, and periodically until their deaths. I was kind and compassionate to them. They confirmed my persona of strong, loving, wise, and responsible. But until several weeks ago, when the irresponsible bomb was dropped on my self-image, I never knew who they were for me. They were both, in their helplessness and lack of status, the symbol of the self I could not love. They were just themselves, extremely imperfect people, obviously imperfect people that I just cared about, that I just loved, and they loved me. So for an hour or so a week, I could love two people who were without achievement or exceptionalism. I could love myself in them. Now, every summer for 5 years, when I was a priest and teaching at the seminary, I spent those summers in Virginia Beach volunteering at the ARE as a sharing group leader. In those 5 summers, I heard hundreds of lectures at the ARE about the metaphysical, the spiritual, and the supernatural. Yet one lecture stands out from all the lectures that I heard. It was by a medium who communicated with those passed on in spirit. She said one thing I have never forgotten. She said the point she made was that there were souls standing in line to be born as extremely handicapped people, as beggars, and as nobodies. The movie stars, the rich and famous, the privileged lives were not thought of as soul growth opportunities, but actually as a bit risky in terms of soul growth. The helpless and handicapped, the Down syndrome kids, all were learning to be loved without the decoration of a fancy persona. They were learning to be loved and to love themselves as God loved them, just for them. One time when I was a teenager, I was over at my grandmother's house, and a doctor came to visit. His name was Hart Hagen. He was an old man, and he'd had a number of strokes. So he was bent over He dragged his foot when he walked. Couldn't walk very well. And he drooled. This famous doctor in Louisville, Kentucky, Hart Hagen, famous surgeon, was now a man who couldn't keep his saliva in his mouth. I remember looking at him and thinking, oh my God, I hope I'm never, ever like him. He was with his sister who was helping him. And I remember his sister said, it's a shame about Hart. But you know, I think I love him more than I ever have before. I just love Hart. And I didn't understand. Now I think I'm getting it. We had an old monk where I went to school named Father Stanislaus. And he used to say to the group, you are nothing and you are everything. And my friends, God adores you. Thank you.